Looking at the preseason polls, I can divide the MEAC into three even tiers. Of course, North Carolina Central and Howard are in tier one, but what order did they fall in? Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Like I told you on Monday, today's episode is all about MEAC Media Day because I do feel like we have some very interesting words to dissect, a bunch of interesting points from the preseason poll to break down. We'll wrap up today's episode by taking a look at the MEAC offensive and defensive preseason players of the year. I'll give you a little bit of spoiler. They're both from Howard. Prior to that, Howard is very heavy on this episode, but isn't that to be expected? Prior to that, Howard and North Carolina Central, they're the top dogs. But what separates them, and this is just a prediction, this is not given to me, but this is me projecting what I believe the difference is and why one team was number one and the other team was number two. But speaking of the preseason polls, there are 6 teams in the MEAC, and I have divided them into 3 categories based off of perception going into the year. I don't know what things are going to be like, but hey, this is projection season, and I told you this is not really what I do, but I decided to get in on the fun because here goes the preseason poll for the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. You have North Carolina Central at 1, so we're going 1 down to 6. You have Central, Howard, Morgan State, South Carolina State, and then you also have Norfolk and Delaware State at the bottom. Okay, I can take those 6 teams and I can divide them up 2 teams apiece into 3 even tiers, and it kind of feels like the teams are interchangeable to a certain degree. It kind of feels like if one was number 1 and the other guy was 2, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. If one was 3 and one was 4, okay, that makes sense. A little less with 5 and 6 though. I will say that 5 and 6, they feel like where they're supposed to be. Delaware State doesn't really feel like the perception is they could be above Norfolk State, but they feel like they're in the same tier, if that makes sense. Set spots within the same tier. The other 2, tier 1 and tier 2, matter of fact, let me break down. Could I actually, it's not like they did this for us. I did this. This is my tiers of how I view the perception, and the polls kind of cemented that belief. You have tier 1, which is the championship contenders. I feel like that title speaks for itself. Do I really need to elaborate on what it means to be a championship contender? You have North Carolina Central and you have Howard in that tier. Those are the last 2 conference champions. Those are the teams that we said would be the top dogs coming into MEAC Media Day, and we were right about that walking out of MEAC Media Day. I feel the need to stress again, once again, this is perception. This is the perception of the team and how I feel like they are viewed entering the season. This is, of course, about talent because your talent shapes your perception, but this isn't even I think that they're going to do this or this going to be that. So now you go into tier 2, and that's the up and comers. Some questions about the team. Are they really ready to step into that next tier? Are they ready to become a tier 1 team? Let's remember, at the end of the season, maybe I'll reflect on this. But tier 2 can't be up and comers. That doesn't feel like a postseason tier. That feels like a preseason tier. But at the end of the season, I could have 3 teams in tier 1. There's no rule that says that I have to only have 2 teams in each tier, and that's where I have to divide. I have to cut off here. So no matter how great you are, you have to be separated. No, I can have 3 teams in tier 1. I can have no teams in the scrubbed category and the afterthoughts. That's what tier 3 is. So right now, tier 2 is my up and comers. There's hype around these squads, but there's still a little bit of reservation at the same time. So while you have your championship contenders where it's all hype, you feel like they can go get it right now, it would be absolutely no surprise. Matter of fact, I expect them to be in the conference championship race in tier 2, which is South Carolina State and Morgan State. Actually, Morgan, then South Carolina State, if we're going to keep it in order. In that tier, you now have teams who, if they were to creep into tier 1, I wouldn't be shocked. But I'm not saying I expect them to fight for the championship. There's some hype around them. It feels like Morgan State has been building up to this. South Carolina State, though they have a lot of talent, on that team, it's really about Chennis Berry. And I can look at the offensive line with both squads. Damon Wilson says we have 4 of our 5 offensive linemen last year who were freshmen. They're coming back with more experience. They're coming back in a new system. Morgan State is going to need to keep that defense together, because if they do that, then I feel like they can be in every single game. But on top of that, you got to get the offense. And I like Todd Smith. I'm going to be honest with you. I like Todd Smith, and I saw what he did last year, and I was kind of like, okay, this is the guy you need to build with. So I'm very happy that they are building with him, and hopefully he can build on top of that, because I saw some potential there, and he's only going into his true sophomore season. Then Chennis Berry, with his offensive line, 3 all-conference offensive linemen on the first team. You're looking at a guy who loves to run the ball. Oh, yeah, this is a match made in heaven. Then you have tier 3, the afterthoughts. And the afterthoughts are Norfolk State, and you have Norfolk State, and Delaware State. We're not really thinking about them. Like I said, Norfolk State feels a little bit above, because they actually have a really highly regarded team. And you look at all conference players, they have the most all conference players. Like, I think they have one more than Howard does. So there is some value in Norfolk State's roster. I don't know what it is. They have the first team all conference quarterback. I don't know, but for whatever reason, maybe they just feel like they're not with these other squads, but it does feel as if the perception is nobody's thinking Norfolk State is going to come in and make some noise. I think that they could climb into that 3-4, but I do not see them as 1-2 right now. Let's see if there's any notes I forgot to mention on tier 1 or 2. Oh, there are some notes I forgot to mention on tier 1, but we're about to get into them right now. So that's, matter of fact, let's just save that part. Take that into segment 2, because segment 2 is all about Howard and North Carolina Central. What is the separation between these two teams? Because they are in the same tier to me. But they went with Howard at number 2, despite being the defending MEAC champions. Are we in agreement with this decision? I don't know. Let's look at it as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. And listen, maybe you want to go to a ball game. Maybe you're lucky enough to be in Chicago or be in Vegas or be in, well, I guess we have a team here too. I'm talking about lucky enough. But shout out Arike, WNBA All-Star MVP, Dallas Wings member. We need to go ahead and change that to Arlington Wings, just like the Dallas Renegades became the Arlington Renegades, but that's neither here nor there. I can complain about this while I'm in my seat that I bought via Gametime, and I'm going to make sure that it's a good seat, because I don't have to sit there and guess, I wonder what things look like from this angle. With Gametime, I'm allowed to look at my seat or look at the view of the arena from my seat. So I love that about Gametime. It's a huge benefit to me because it takes out a lot of the guesswork. It also takes out a lot of the expensive when you have things like flash deals, zone deals, and just in general, even if you're not able to cop a deal, you're still able to get the best price last minute tickets. You can get them all the way up to an hour after tip-off, kickoff, whatever you need. Go ahead, the first pitch, all of that. Go ahead and go to Gametime, get some athletics tickets, get some tickets to a concert, to a theater play, to a comedy show. You can get everything you want on Gametime. So don't think that it's just your athletics, but that is one of the things you can grab. So go to Gametime, download the app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports today. It's the first of its kind, 24/7, all day, every day, live sports network on YouTube. So go ahead and go to Locked On Sports Today. That's the entire thing, Locked On Sports Today, and subscribe to take advantage of this great, great, great content. I don't envy the person who had, or the people who had to make the decision between North Carolina Central and Howard. I don't envy those people because on Monday's episode, I came and I told you, I project this to be the top dogs. That's not, I don't need a pat on my back. That was easy, right? I think that was a very safe assumption to say Howard and North Carolina Central were going to be the top dogs in the MEAC preseason polls. But I ain't have the balls to go out there and tell you who was going to be number one. And I'm glad I didn't have to make that decision. I will say this, though. I probably would have picked Howard. You know I mean that because who would admit to being wrong, right? And I don't even know if this is necessarily wrong, but I think I would have went with Howard solely based off the fact that they are the defending champions. And this is very difficult because I do think that these are the top dogs with very slight separation. I just spent the last segment detailing what each tier was, talking about the slight separation between tier 2 and tier 3. Now I said, you know what, let's come back in with tier 1. Tier 1 to me is so close, but I thought that Jay Walker had a great quote during the MEAC Media Day, and it wasn't a question. He was just talking about the preseason polls, and I think he's right. And that quote, he didn't tell us what the distinguishing factor is for the voters, but I think by giving his own criteria of who's going to win, what's going to be the deciding factor, and who's going to win this conference, he probably vocalized what those voters were thinking. And this is the quote by Jay Walker. He said, the storyline is two teams have to replace legendary quarterbacks. Whoever gets a quarterback first will have the biggest say and possibly make it to Atlanta. Yeah. I would agree. I would say that the quarterback position is obviously the most important on the field. It's not the only one. These are complete teams. So though they have quarterback questions, you still feel as if they can be the top teams in the conference for a reason. But I just think at the end of the day, the voters have more faith in Walker Harris. When I'm looking at North Carolina Central, I'm looking at Howard, and I'm looking at how close they are, and I'm looking at Jay Walker talking about who can replace their quarterback, will probably have the biggest say and probably make it to Atlanta. It all comes together like, yeah, the voters probably have more confidence in Walker Harris than they do Howard's quarterback, because I've seen Walker Harris. I've seen one game of Walker Harris as a starter, and he threw 5 touchdowns. Jay Walker I think he was trying to throw a slight at Valley. Be honest with you. I think Jay Walker was trying to throw a slight at Valley by asking Trey Oliver who was those touchdowns against. Oliver said it don't matter. And then talked about how his touchdowns, Jay Walker, your touchdown didn't matter who it was against. I think that was a slight at the talent level, to be honest. Maybe I'm just taking shots at Valley so often that I'm projecting now. I don't think so though. But Walker Harris inspires confidence. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Walker Harris inspires confidence in North Carolina Central. And Trey Oliver is so vocal that Walker Harris, now inspires confidence in us. See, when I'm watching Trey Oliver talk, I believe, and did not tell y'all you give Chennis Berry a microphone. Oh, it's magic. Oh my God, it was great. Just like it was the only segment in which Tiffany Green did not send them to break. She said, Chennis, I need you to do this. And he did it, man. He said, I'm smashing the. Anyway, that's not the point right now. Walker Harris is likely, because we don't even know who, that's the thing. When you're looking at the slight separation between North Carolina Central, and you're looking at the slight separation between Central and Howard, you start looking at the quarterback position because it's very important. I know who North Carolina Central's quarterback is going to be. Is he Davius Richard? No, he's a first-time starting quarterback as far as season long. But I did see him play one game, and I saw him throw 5 touchdowns in that game. But then I have to question who's going to be Howard's quarterback. So obviously, Walker Harris, he invokes more confidence than whoever's going to be there for Howard. They still have some guys that haven't figured that out yet. Walker Harris invokes confidence in North Carolina Central. And when you hear Trey Oliver speak about Walker Harris, it's hard for you to not have confidence in Walker Harris as well. Let's look at the separation between these two teams, or just some things about the two teams real quick. This is the second year in a row we've seen Central Howard in that order as the preseason prediction for 1 and 2. The recent trends will tell you that Howard's going to win. The reason I say that is only because over the last 2 seasons, you've seen the number 2 team in the poll win. That team was never the defending champion, though. So that could break some things up. I'm fascinated. Each season, first it was South Carolina State, then it was Central. Central came on and they won. Then it was Central and Howard. Howard came on and they won. And not only that, they kept getting their lick back. Central made sure they got their lick back on Howard. Got their lick back on South Carolina State this year, at least. I guess it's a little different. But when you're looking at who's going to be the top dogs, this one's tough for me because I would have went with Howard. I would have based it off because they're so close. I would have used the defending championship as the tiebreaker. I'll say that. But then I also just think they have the more highly regarded roster when you look at the all conference. I don't know what it is. The only thing I can point to is quarterback play. But once again, I'm looking at Jarrett Hunter. I'm looking at Eden James. I'm looking at the defense of Howard. I'm liking all of that. Is Walker Harris enough to make that much of a difference? I would say it is. Once again, this is not me basing my criteria. That's where I'm getting the hesitancy. That's why you hear the hesitancy in my voice, because what I am is I'm arguing a point that is not mine to make. I'm arguing a point that does not belong to me. I have more confidence in Walker Harris than whoever's coming out of Howard. Don't get me wrong. I do have confidence in that, which is why it's easy for me to fight this case. But I just don't know if I would have went this way. I'm safe, y'all. I'm very conservative with it. I'm very conservative. I'm not a big risk taker. So maybe that's me. Maybe I need to go out on a limb. If North Carolina Central were to be the top dog, now this does set something up because Trey Oliver brought up a really interesting point. I don't know if it was interesting to everybody else, but it was interesting to me. Right now, they are predicted to win the MEAC. Alabama State is predicted to win the SWAC. Technically, they're predicted to win the SWAC East, but I think it's a safe assumption that the prediction is also they'll win the conference. These two teams face off in the Orange Blossom Classic. If it were to happen this way and they both won their conference, they would then face off again in the Celebration Bowl, which would be the first time ever that the Celebration Bowl has been a rematch of two teams that faced off earlier in the season. That would be really interesting. And that's one thing that got me. No one really talked about the fact that if they both win their conference, they would then meet up again. They just said, oh, this is the two top projections meeting up in the Orange Blossom Classic. Maybe they didn't want to look too forward, but I don't have to play the game. I always say that. Yeah, I look past opponents. 100%. I look past opponents from my seat. I don't, as a fan, never. Right? If we talking about the Saints, I never look past an opponent because I understand what it could be. But when we sitting here and we talking about the schedule, I ain't got to give you that coach speak BS about it being one game at a time. I don't have to do that. I'm looking to Howard versus Central. I'm looking to Morgan State versus Howard. I'm looking towards these games. All right. I'm just telling you right now. We all got it though. Overall, let me make sure I got all my points out real quick. Okay, yeah, I did. Had to make sure go through the notes, make sure I got everything. I'm gonna tell y'all the truth. I probably would have went Howard just to play it safe. I'm not mad about it. Like I told you, they're interchangeable. If you would have went Howard versus Central, I wouldn't have been mad. If you go Central then Howard, I'm not mad. This is going to be a very interesting year. I do believe that quarterback play was the ultimate decider in why the voters, which Trey Oliver said he was not a part of, they decided to go with Central on top. I'll be fascinated. But then again, if I had Walker Harris, I probably have a lot of confidence too. As we push forward, I'm going to give you another reason that this is surprising to me, that Howard is not number one. They have the preseason offensive and defensive player of the year. They're the returning champ, and he still didn't give it to him. Okay, let's break down Jarrett Hunter and Kenny Gallop as we continue with Locked On HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. We just looked at the separation between Howard and North Carolina Central. It was a difficult topic for me. I don't know why. I played devil's advocate amazingly. But today I was struggling a little bit. And it's not that I'm so strong on Howard being number one, but it's the fact that I do feel like Howard should have been number one in my conservative nature. And looking at everything else that was put out to me, It feels like, you know what it might be? It may be Walker Harris and Trey Oliver, because coaching is not a part of these preseason teams. Because I'm looking at the fact that Howard has one in the offensive player, or the number one offensive player, and the number one defensive player, and they're the defending champions, and they have more all conference talent. It's got to come down to the coach and the quarterback, arguably the two most important positions on the field. But anyway, we're not here to continue that topic. That was segment 2. We leave that in the past. I'm here to look at Jarrett Hunter, and I'm here to look at Kenny Gallop, because those are the two players who got the offensive and defensive player of the year, and they're both Howard Bison. I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't think that Jarrett Hunter wins the offensive player of the year. I just don't. He's an extremely talented player, one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in Black college football. Okay. But situationally, it don't add up for him. And it's not because he's a running back. It's because he's a running back who has to share the ball with an equally talented running back. Eden James is really good. And I think that because they're going to divide up carries with great effectiveness too. It's not as if you're going to have Jarrett Hunter who's killing it, and when he needs a breather, we'll bring in Eden James. They might split this 50-50, 55-45, 60-40 at the most. Because you're going to take up so many of his carries, I don't think he's going to have the raw numbers to be the offensive player of the year. This is no hate to him. I think he's extremely talented. I think he is an offensive player of the year talent. I don't know if he's going to get offensive player of the year opportunities. And that is the difference. It's a real thing. If Eden James is coming in here averaging the most yards per carry, which I think he did last year, then, hey, we're going to be seeing a season where I'm questioning if Jarrett Hunter is going to be the guy. Matter of fact, let's see. I have this right here, don't I? Oh, Eden James averaged the most yards per game, and he averaged more yards per carry. Sorry, it's very small on the screen, so I had to lean in. But you're looking at Jarrett Hunter, who is a great back, who's going to share the field with another great back. Naturally, is going to eat away from their production. But I do think they may run the ball more than they did last year. So we'll have to see. This is going to be fascinating. But I think that, and it's not like I'm predicting Eden James to win either. I'm not saying who's better. I'm just telling you that I think the opportunities are limited when you share a backfield with another excellent running back who's going to get a lot. He may be the hot hand. There may be games where Eden James gets more carries than Jarrett Hunter because Eden James is the top dog. Or excuse me, Eden James is the hot hand. And in that game, he will be considered the top dog. If you're going to have to go back and forth with sometimes it'll be you, sometimes it'll be your partner, that doesn't line up to being an offensive player of the year, even if you are extremely talented. Now you look at Kenny Gallop, and he's a part of a 3-man race. I'll say this again. If anybody other than Kenny Gallop, and then also Morgan State defenders Elijah Williams and Eric Hunter win the defensive player of the year, I would be surprised. These are my 3 front runners, and I wouldn't be shocked. I said that Kenny Gallop should have won this award. I do believe that he earned the right to be the preseason defensive player of the year. He would have been my selection. He's the reigning defensive player of the year. Everything lines up, which isn't always the case when it comes to Howard and how people are voting. Clearly, when everything lines up, they still get it. But here, you're looking at him, man. 3-year starter, 3-year all MEAC player, 2-time first team. And I want to look at what he was able to do over the last season that's different than his 2 prior campaigns. So he had 72 tackles, which is around what he had as a true sophomore. And because he didn't play but 2 games as a freshman. So you're looking at sophomore, that's when he had 10, and I think he played 9 games last year, something like that. So he has 72 tackles, which is 3 less than he had as a sophomore. He had 4 tackles for a loss, which is an increase. He's went 2, 3, 4. He stepped up his tackle for loss numbers each year by 1. And then you're looking at his sacks. He actually got into the backfield, and the true difference in what he was able to do, because, got to make sure I get my numbers right. I got this picture, and writing the numbers down and saying, I'm not doing that, bro. I'm just going to take this little screenshot, and I'm going to zoom in while I'm talking to y'all. Do y'all enjoy when I give y'all looks behind the curtains? Because I ain't got to. I don't have to if y'all don't want me to. But anyway, he had a sack and a half, already a different aspect of his game because he had never done that. He had 0 sacks leading up to the season. Now you have 2 interceptions. He has 0 interceptions leading up to the season. You're looking at 5 pass deflections, which is his best of his career. Then you have 1 forced fumble, and you have 1 fumble recovery. Overall, what you see when it comes to Kenny Gallop is a playmaker. What you saw him in his senior year, now he's going into his 5th year. When you see him in his senior year, what he was able to do that was different than his prior campaigns is Kenny Gallop became a playmaker. He became able to get 2 forced fumbles or a fumble recovery and a forced fumble, a couple of interceptions. He had a couple pass breakups to go with it. That's normal, but he's a difference maker now. He added something completely new to his game, which is being able to take the ball away. And when you are a turnover machine, that is going to get you a lot of love. I'll be interested to see if he's able to continue his turnover production, because I do think that's what earned him this Defensive Player of the Year and the Aeneas Williams Award and all the all-American teams that he got. He was a 4-time All-American last year. That preseason All-American. I'm looking at a guy who's highly decorated. This was his award. Now Elijah Williams and Eric Hunter are going to be in the conversations of, hey, if I do X, is that enough? If I do Y, is that enough? If I do Z, right? Because I think that Hunter, as a linebacker who's very versatile, I think he has a good chance at this. He could get some interceptions of his own. He get some sacks, get some tackles for loss. He might be the leading tackler again. I'm loving this, guys. The MEAC Defensive Player of the Year is arguably one of the top 5 storylines that I'll be watching in 2024. I'll say that, and I'll close out on that. In the meantime, in between time, we'll be back tomorrow with Gerald Huggins. It'll be an afternoon show. 5:30 is when I think we're going to go ahead and release it. We have Gerald Huggins in the top 10 top 10 HBCU prospects heading into next year's draft cycle in this year's season. I'm excited. I'm through the roof, and I cannot wait. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.